FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and well, today is April 20th, 2020. That's 3 20s in a row. If you add them together, you eventually come out with 6 plus 4 is 10, and 1 plus 0 is 1. And hey, put that in your numerological pipe and smoke it. I have no idea what that means. If anything, what I do know is that crude oil crashed this morning. It's down 40+%. If you can believe it, it's trading like $10 a barrel. I mean, you could literally take your allowance and go buy a barrel of oil. I don't know what you do with it because it weighs a lot. It's 42 gallons after all. But what does that mean for the world economy that was already teetering, and where is that going to leave us? Does ExxonMobil, does Royal Dutch Shell, do all the major oil companies in the world go bankrupt? Is that where we're at? Well, let's find out. We want your opinion. Why don't you email us? The email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, John Rubino's with us now to help clear up this conundrum. John, so did you ever think you'd live to see, basically, if you just divide 10 by 42, and we're not even talking about how much more oil they get when they actually refine it, they get like 10% more oil than they started out with. Did you ever think you're going to see 25 cent a gallon oil again?
Well, I mean, it is free in some places right now, but the WTI crude oil is, according to oilprice.com right now, is down by 43% on the day to $10.38 a barrel. That is the worst day in the history of the oil market. That's a pretty big deal because oil is not, it's not like bauxite or, zinc or something, some very, not tiny, but not gigantic market. Oil is one of the biggest markets in the world. There was a time not so long ago when it was $2 trillion, the production of oil in a given year. And, now, what do you think it is now? Like 150 billion or something like that. It's down so far. And that is reverberating through the global economy and the global financial system because, the oil companies are huge. The oil producing countries, in a lot of cases, depend on oil to balance their budgets. So now they're liable to go bankrupt. I mean, what happens to Saudi Arabia if their revenues are cut by 70% or whatever the number is going to be year over year here, when they were already having to borrow money, even at $60 a barrel oil. So there are going to be explosions that flow from this. And then, of course, the shale oil companies and the frackers and everybody, what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen to them? The government's going to bail them out by buying all their junk bonds. And so the price of their junk bonds will not tank because the government is buying them. That's the craziest part of this whole thing. Markets fluctuate. Oil has gone down into the tens in the past, in other financial crises. And when the economy recovers, oil recovers. And they make big cuts in production. They're talking about, a 10 million barrel a day cut that is already being implemented, and they're going to have to double that. Now, the Saudi energy minister just came out and said cuts could reach 20 million barrels per day. So they'll do that. The supply will shrink. Demand won't grow all that much because we can't drive that much in a pandemic. It'll come back into balance. But along the way, it's going to blow up a lot of different entities out there. What a time for the government to be buying shale oil junk bonds, because that's the lifeline there, Maybe we'll just nationalize the whole energy sector now that the prices are down. This is such a crazy time. So first of all, the big story today is oil. It's crashing, and we will see the results of that crash play out through the system over the next few weeks or months. So it's going to be a headline story, not so much the price, because it can't go much below $10. I mean, if it hits zero, what happens then? That's kind of the equivalent to negative interest rates, right? It's a price that something cannot go below if you're talking about oil. But interest rates went below zero in a lot of cases. So will we have a market in which the oil that is produced has to be given away because there's no storage for it or whatever? We're in absolutely crazy territory now. And of course, the U.S. government is responding to that, or all governments are responding to that by creating huge amounts of new currency. The increase in sovereign debt is going to be something like from 105% of GDP to 122% of GDP this year, in 1 year in the world. And there's no real end to it, because once you take on debt like that, you never pay it off. I mean, nobody has lowered their national debt other than Russia. Russia's the only country that's done it in the whole world over the past 30 or 40 years. Nobody has managed to cut the total amount of debt outstanding more than by a minuscule amount, and even that's usually just accounting tricks like the U.S. in the 1990s. So whatever debt we take on, we're going to carry forward, and apparently we're going to take on more debt this year than any society has ever taken on in the history of the human race. So we got the worst day in the history of the oil market and the biggest year of debt accumulation in history. And what comes after that? Oh, and we might as well talk about the retail apocalypse now, too, because
good old needless markup.
Yeah. What was that? Nameless markup?
Needless markup. That's what they call it. Neiman Marcus.
Yeah. Neiman Marcus is getting ready to file Chapter 11, and they're just the first of many. And unless the federal government steps in and bails these guys out. I mean,
they will.
I haven't actually been in a department store for years, but can you imagine what it's like in Macy's or JCPenney? Are there still Bloomingdale's? What it's like in a Bloomingdale?
Bloomingdale's is still around. Macy's, they've been all closing down. JCPenney's going to go bankrupt. They missed an interest payment, and a number of retailers are basically in the tank here, John.
But they've got to be like walking through a mausoleum or something like that, right? You hear your footsteps echoing because there's nobody around to make any kind of sound that muffles. It must just be so strange, really. And, this was always coming. The retail apocalypse was a story before the coronavirus hit, because online shopping and really hyper-efficient big box stores like Costco are just squeezing the other brick and mortar retailers out of the business. Mm-hmm. And, I go to Costco and buy stuff online.
Yes.
And used to go to Ross for Less once in a while because that's a cool store. But now that's closed because it's not essential. So that just leaves Costco and Amazon.
And Walmart. Don't forget Walmart and Target.
Yeah. Walmart's creepy. There is Walmart, but that store creeps me out. I kind of have PTSD for an hour or two after I get back from there.
I understand.
Whatever you look for in Walmart is at the other side of the store, which is a quarter mile away.
Yeah.
And then your
That's
next
so
thing,
true.
because you're not going through your list correctly, your next thing is a quarter mile in the other direction. And there's nobody to ask. And, why buy it there unless you want the exercise? If you need the workout, Walmart is fine, but otherwise Amazon has it right there on your screen. So sometime when we have more time, we should talk about the positive implications of the death of bricks and mortar real estate or of retailing. Yeah. Because it's possible it frees up, first of all, a lot of buildings that can be used for actual uses like schools and shelters and things like that. Yeah. And also it's possible that, we're just going to end up plowing under these strip malls, these horrible, ugly strip malls that are everywhere now, and returning some of that land to nature, which would be really nice. So it's possible that there is good that comes from the destruction of big bricks and mortar retailing right now. But, that's in the future. Today it's a lot of people who work in places like that who have literally nowhere to turn now because, if you were a waiter in a TGI Fridays in a mall or something like that, and everything closes, where are you going to go? How do your job skills translate into your next career move? And, it's not clear that they do at all. And there are a lot of people out there who must just be bereft, who are sitting in their houses on lockdown, and it's not clear that their job is ever going to come back. And they're wondering what they're going to do with their lives. And, hopefully the way markets normally work is that when one thing shrivels up and dies, something else comes along, creative destruction. A better thing comes along with better jobs to satisfy the same need that the old thing that's dying satisfied. Yes. And boy, it just seems like the pandemic has swamped that process, right? That we aren't going to create a bunch of new jobs in other fields in the next 6 months. So it's really not clear how this plays out, because if they cured coronavirus today and we all just went back to work, how much of what we used to do will we still do?
I
don't plan on taking any. Hey, did you see that cruise lines are seeing a big jump in bookings?
Absolutely. Hey,
that's amazing to me.
That's not really. Look, you have been stuck inside for over a month, and you probably canceled your travel plans for 2 months, and you've been stuck with your kids and whatever significant other, and you want out. And what my buddy Nick Santiago says, he's a master trader. He's looking at the chart formations in Hyatt, in Hilton, and in Marriott, and Delta Airlines, and all the other airlines, same chart formations. And he's seeing that depending where those charts go in the next few days, we could see a massive rally in the hotel and airline stocks, travel stocks, restaurant stocks, everything, because there's such pent-up demand. Now, whether that will go or not, whether it'll keep going or not, after the first 2-3 months of it is anybody's guess. But for right now, things are looking up for the travel sector. They've all been bailed out by Uncle Sam, and now it's onward and upward.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Financial Survival Network is brought to you today by Oren Resources, a junior exploration company with the appetite of a major. It's hot on the trail of the next globally significant discovery, creating enormous potential upside for you, the shareholder. Oren is one of the most aggressive exploration companies pursuing high-grade, scalable gold and copper deposits, and has a premier 7-project portfolio, including its 2 flagships, Committee Bay in the Arctic and Sombrero in Peru. Oren's unparalleled technical team and highly experienced management has a history of success in advancing and monetizing exploration assets. No wonder Oren's been called one of the best in the junior exploration sector. Oren trades on the TSX and the NYSE under AUG. To learn more, go to orenresources.com. That's AURYN resources.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, I get the government giving Carnival Cruise Lines a bunch of money improves their survival odds, but I really don't see how, once we've seen what it's like to be on a cruise ship when somebody gets sick on that cruise ship, and then you're just stuck there with all these diseases all around you. You can't leave your room, and nobody will let you disembark. And I don't know. That seems like the kind of risk that would ruin a vacation psychologically. Because if you're thinking, all right, there's only like a 5% chance of this happening again, right? But what if it did? I would not want to take that risk on. I wouldn't want to pay a lot of money to take that risk on either. But apparently, we're more resilient than,
yes. Hey, look, after 9/11, John, after 9/11, nobody was flying. And then within a month, the airlines were packed. And they stayed packed up until now. So people forget about this stuff. We've had noroviruses and stuff on cruise ships for a decade now, and people still go. So they're going to go back on the cruise ships. They're going back to the hotels, back to the Airbnbs. How long and how much money, when money will run out, I can't tell you, but I can tell you human nature is to overcompensate for whatever deprivation they recently endured. And this is a major deprivation. And history will bear out the fact there was no reason for it, because in the end, the fatality rate is probably not going to be much higher than normal influenza when they actually do random population samplings and see that there's a 0.03% chance that you're going to, or 0.3%, I think, that you're going to actually die from it. 3% chance that you could get infected, because it's places where they've done it 2.5 to 4% of the population had antibodies, and a 0.03% chance of mortality from it. So roughly 1 in 100 people who get infected actually die from it, if that. And it'll probably be lower than that. You know, that's what's that will be the upshot of this, John. I mean, I can see it on the handwriting on the wall. It's like Y2K, you know? It's just like Y2K.
Okay. Well, that would be great. Even from a gloom and doom, I want to short everything in sight standpoint, which is, a lot of time that's how I look at markets. But you don't want it to be because of a horrible health thing, a natural disaster that hurts a lot of people. That's no way to make money shorting stocks. So speaking of which, you know what the best short is now? If your scenario plays out, Netflix. Right? Yeah. Because everybody in the world subscribed to Netflix, and they've been sitting there watching every conceivable thing that's on Netflix that they could possibly want to watch, and a whole bunch of stuff that they wish they didn't watch, and there's nothing left. So they've used up Netflix, and the minute it looks like we're all being allowed to go outside again, Netflix subscriptions will tank, because half the people who have it now have used it up, and they're going to say, okay, well, let me go see what's on Disney, or they'll just go outside for 6 months and not sit in front of the TV anymore. So you want to short Netflix if you're optimistic about the course of the pandemic. In other words, if we go back to work within the next month or two, then Netflix is going down by 50% minimum. So there's your big short.
Yeah. Hey, so what about Tesla? Oil's down to $10 a barrel, and Tesla's over $700. What's going on there, John?
I'm not understanding that, because Tesla's starting to look like Bitcoin, where its price does stuff that doesn't make any sense. It has these huge runs, and then it collapses, and then it has But you're right. One of the big selling points of electric cars is that they are no more expensive to run than internal combustion engine cars, but they're just way more fun and way cooler, right? Mm-hmm. So as long as the cost differential isn't huge, electric cars are viable, and they're a growing part of the automotive sector. But what's gas going to be if oil is $10 a barrel? Is gas going to be like a buck or something? It's going to be something like that.
$1.49 in West Palm Beach. Yeah.
So that, you would think, would really slow down the penetration rate of electric cars. Just as, if electricity usage goes down, then that would slow down the adoption of solar power, because we don't need that much new capacity. But it's an even more stark statement about the electric vehicle market, because that's, it's a brand new market, and it really needs to be not way more expensive than a conventional car. Otherwise, we'll stick with what we know. So you would think that Tesla would be getting crushed today, right? And is it? Let me see. I think not. I think Tesla
was down $5 last time I looked.
Oh, it's down $1.36 right now, but at $752. It was in the did it drop into the 300s? It definitely dropped into the 400s for a while. In the latest, where it tanked.
Oh yeah, yes.
So, so it has come close to doubling, while oil has been having its worst stretch in that market's history. We need to look into this and see what's going on there, because that doesn't make any sense. Oh, and also nobody's buying Teslas. Nobody's buying anything right now. So their sales are down. Mm-hmm. Their factories must be operating on skeleton crews or closed right now.
Yeah.
And yet the stock is through the roof.
They hit $361 back on March 18th. That was the nadir. And before that, they had hit 900, well, on a closing basis, daily closing, 917, and the double top was 899. That was the sign that stock was going to crash. And now it's retraced back 2/3 of its loss. So that kind of makes total sense, right?
Well, it makes sense if there's a reason for the business to exist 3 years from now. And, that's not clear with gas at $1 a gallon.
Not.
It's possible that all the electric car makers, well, Tesla's really the only pure electric car maker that's notable, that they will have to go bankrupt, and then their assets will have to be bought at 1/10 the original cost by somebody else, who then runs those assets when the market starts to come back. That happens at the bleeding edge of industries a lot, where somebody has a great idea, but it's a little too early.
They can't implement.
And they can't. They can't generate enough cash flow early on, so somebody buys them out at a fire sale price and then runs those assets profitably later when the market is more mature. So it could be that is Tesla's fate, but the people buying a stock don't think so. And,
no, they sure don't.
It would be interesting to investigate that and see what they're thinking.
They're whatever Kool-Aid Elon Musk serves up, man, and he serves up prodigious amounts. They can't seem to get enough of it, right?
He's this generation's Steve Jobs. The guy is just a magnetic personality. And somewhat crazy one at the same time. Who does capture people's imaginations? And you got to give him credit to be that big. Must be really fun, because he has, he's just the biggest guy in the room wherever he goes, and probably has been for most of his life. So he's leading an interesting life, but it's hard to see how this particular business of his survives if the world doesn't snap back right away to its old self. So, and which takes us to real estate.
Yes.
Do we have time to talk about what are you seeing down there, Kerry? Are you seeing big price cuts?
No, because there's no market now, because you can't go look at a house that's occupied, and you can only look at empty houses, and lots of problems. I got to believe that so there's no price discovery. There's no price discovery. So
out here in Washington, the houses that I've been looking at are just sitting there.
Yeah,
they're not selling. They're not being pulled off the market or anything. They're just sitting there on Zillow, and there are some price cuts, but it's not wholesale. And it's not every single house on the list is now down by 30%. There's nothing like that yet. So it's interesting. I wonder how this plays out.
Well, maybe the government will buy all the houses too.
That's next on the list because,
right?
Well, they'll pay off mortgages.
Yes.
And instead of just saying, well, you can wait 6 months to pay your mortgage, one of the things the government could do. This is actually a bigger topic because governments are once again bailing out the guys who don't necessarily deserve to be bailed out. They're funneling huge amounts of money into big companies and to the big banks, who are just feasting on all this newly created currency. And they're giving relatively little of it to small businesses and to individuals. So if governments wanted to do this right from an equity standpoint, in other words, give money to people who actually deserve it for a change, those $1,200 checks should be made permanent.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what they're talking about, $2,000 a month guaranteed basic income for a year.
UBI.
Yeah.
And just not, and then, presume that money is going to be spent and it will help businesses that way, instead of giving JP Morgan Chase an extra $500 billion or something like that. That's history will look back on this as just, another huge boondoggle where we just give a huge amount of money to the 1%. Enrich them even further, while we just keep everybody else on starvation wages. Just give us enough to stay alive, and give huge amounts of money to these guys who are already very rich. And there was even some billionaire that was on CNBC or someplace saying that. And he's saying, let the big companies fail. That's how capitalism works. You have failure, and that teaches us something.
I
and
agree.
Take care of the individuals who are affected by it.
But here's the problem with that. That would presume an orderly rate of failure of businesses. When you have massive failures of large businesses, the bankruptcy system is not equipped to deal with it. There is no way to deal with it on a judicial means, which means that the situation has to be solved politically. There's just no other way, John. And that's the problem. That's why you can't just let them fail. As much as I love the concept of letting them stew in their own juices, it's just not practical to do that.
Well, or bail them out at draconian costs. In other words, take 40% of the equity of everybody who gets bailed out. Now, see, the really frustrating thing about all this, of all these crises, really, is that from a libertarian point of view, the system ends up doing exactly the opposite of what it should. In other words, we're enacting Bernie Sanders's entire platform.
Yep.
Where, we're going to have UBI. Okay, everybody gets $2,000 a month. And then, of course, we can't let coronavirus healthcare costs bankrupt you. So everybody gets free healthcare, and on and on. Pretty soon, everybody gets their mortgage paid off, and I understand the necessity of keeping the system from collapsing, but at the same time, it's just kind of like the Twilight Zone, where all of a sudden, a Republican administration is out socialisting the left-wing Democrats. So, this election is going to be just bizarre because Trump is going to run on, in a lot of ways, a Bernie Sanders platform against Joe Biden, who's going to sound almost Reagan-esque compared to, because he's got to criticize what the government does, right?
Yeah.
If you're an outsider running against the sitting government, you got to criticize the government's policies. But the government's policies are going to be basically to hand out money to everybody in sight, push interest rates down to negative territory, and just basically enact the leftist, left-wing set of economic policies that you can think of. And so Biden is going to have to sound right-wing in order to run against that.
It's a mixed up, shook up world here for sure. Anyway, we're going to have to leave it at that. So guys, just send us an email. What's your opinion here about the retail apocalypse, oil, Fed buying oil company junk bonds, bailing out everybody in sight? And don't forget, take a look at John's site, dollarcollapse.com, our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. John, we will catch up with you next week, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more to talk about then.
Thanks, Gary. See you next week.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.